Of the four perspectives, the second perspective is the political perspective. In this perspective, we are looking at organization from the political side. What is political side? It says that public administrators, they provide policy input. The policy is formulated by the politicians, and by politicians we mean by the elected people. It is the elected people who formulate policy, and public administrators only provide policy input. But policy input is not only provided by the public administrator. There are many other stakeholders who contribute to policy formulation or providing policy input. Of these stakeholders, the important one, aside from the politicians, are the business community or the commercial community. And then in society, there is civil society or the non-governmental organizations which are providing policy input. Then there are other stakeholders as well. Besides the politicians and the civil society and the non-governmental organization, there are other stakeholders as well who have interest in policy formulation. So in this way, when there are too many stakeholders, it is hard to arrive at a consensus. In this perspective, it is also hard to measure goals, unlike the managerial or the private sector. And therefore, it is hard to measure the effectiveness of the organization, unlike the efficiency, unlike the measurement of goals in the private sector or from the managerial perspective. Since there are too many stakeholders, decision-making usually is muddled through. That is, as I said, there is hard to achieve consensus. Therefore, decision-making takes a longer time, and it takes much longer time to debate issues in the parliament. Have a look at this picture. It's a picture of a parliament where certain bill or certain issues are being debated, and you see the public representatives from different walks of life bringing in their own perspective in the provincial or the National Assembly and debating on the issue. Sometimes it is easier to get a consensus on an issue, but sometimes it is very hard and it takes a much longer time to achieve a consensus on the issue. So there is a general criticism on this particular perspective, and one of the criticism is that there are overlapping functions. What overlapping functions are we talking about? The overlapping function of policy formulation and policy implementation. That is, who is formulating policies and who is implementing policies? Are the public administrators formulating policies, or are the politicians formulating policy, or are the policies being formulated by all the stakeholders? And if the policies are being formulated by all the stakeholders, it brings in inefficiency. It brings in lack of consensus. I hope it brings in lack of consensus. It takes a much longer time for problems to be decided upon. Sometimes the problems keep on lingering, and we observe in the organization, in the public sector, especially organization, that the problems keep on lingering, and it takes a much longer time because the interests of all the stakeholders cannot be addressed at all the time. So while this perspective gives us a way of looking at the organization, it also tells us that how the organizations can become inefficient, unlike the managerial perspective, which tells us that the organizations are very efficient. So this is one way of looking at organizations.